Hey, Dory again. This video is going to be very basic. It's going to teach you how to create a simple form by drawing. You're going to learn how to represent a three-dimensional object on a two-dimensional surface. We're just going to do a sphere today. This is an example of how geometric shapes can be broken down into different forms, very rudimentary forms. When you're ready to draw your objects, you want a good light source. This shows light coming in from a window. This is excellent lighting. You've got a good light side and dark side and a little reflected light. This lighting's not so great. It's backlit, meaning the light's coming from behind, so the front of the objects are all kind of dark and there's not enough contrast. If you want to get good lighting indoors without a window, this lamp is a good idea. It has a very strong direct light source. Your pencil can do a lot of things, from drawing really light to really dark. I'm going to show you a value scale that you're going to practice. It's pretty important for getting started. So your pencil can draw really light and it can draw really dark, and it can do a lot of marks in between. So use your pencil to get darker and darker as you move along your value scale. If it's a little too light or dark on one side, you can come to one end and touch that up. This is an example of a value scale that has a little too quick of a transition. You would want to smooth that out. Here's an example of two value scales. One's way too light and the other is too dark. If you started the top one and ended with the bottom one, that would be a more consistent value scale. But don't forget to go from real light to real dark. How you fill in your object is up to you at this point. I'm going to teach you on another video how to make marks, but I'm going to show you some examples of different ways to make marks so that you have a lot of variety, or at least choices. So here's a bunch of different marks. You can be kind of rough, you can be real smooth, you can go in different directions, you can do circles. There's no really right way to do it, but you'll find a way that's comfortable for you. And here they are represented in spheres. So you get an idea of that, how that'll look. A bad habit is to smear your shadow with your finger. It's not absolutely forbidden, but it's a bad habit in the beginning. You want to learn to get to be adept with your pencil and learn how to make marks with it. So I'm going to show you another bad habit that it will take a little while for you to get rid of this habit. A lot of people come to drawing doing this. You may have learned it in elementary school, but you want to practice for a while to get rid of this habit. This is what we call the hairy line. You're kind of correcting your line as you go. It's an unconfident line. It says, I don't want to make a mark without ruining it. So ideally you want to do this, which is just draw it real fast and then tidying it up. It's real important that you get rid of that hairy line and learn to just draw your lines quickly. It'll take you farther faster. So a good way to get better at drawing a line spontaneously without doing a hairy line is lots of practice. In college, we had to spend hours drawing circles on a page. Here I am drawing circles on a page. You want to go sort of quickly, but not too quickly. And you can tidy them up after you draw them if they're not quite right. So this is one of the most important instructions I'll ever give in drawing, and that is to look at your subject. We're going to do a sphere next, and you want to keep your attention as much as you possibly can on the object, not the paper you're working from. I'll have a whole video on how important that is. But your paper is not going to tell you what that object looks like. So pay attention and just constantly remind yourself, look at your subject. So first I'm drawing out the circle. And I'm going to draw a light outline where the cast shadow is. That's the cast shadow. Now I'm starting to make my mark. I'm doing mid-tone shadows, meaning I'm not going very dark. I can always come back in and do darker shadows. For the moment, I'm just filling in any part that I know is going to have this much shadow. My strokes are going in different directions, or my marks are. There's a little bit of reflected light on the far right side of this sphere. So you want to leave it a little lighter, closer to that most right edge. You can go this fast or you can go a little slower. As I said, your marks may be a little messier or a little tidier than this. That's all right. In the transition area between the dark and the light, I want to go more faint with my marks. That means less pressure on the pencil. You can see how I'm starting to go a little darker in certain areas. Now I'm blocking in my cast shadow. Right up next to the object, that's called the proximity shadow. It's a lot darker right where the object touches the surface. As it moves away from the surface, your pencil marks get lighter and lighter, and the edge of the shadow gets blurrier. I can have it fade out quite a bit at the farthest edge of my shadow. Pay attention to that edge where the object meets the shadow. You don't want to have a bunch of little open spaces. You want it to be nice and smooth. I'm just doing a little bit of tidying here to make things a little cleaner. That isn't necessary, but my style tends to be a little cleaner. And I'm using an eraser to kind of tidy up some of the smear marks. So here my sphere is finished. I'm not teaching you how to do a hyper-realistic sphere, just teaching you the basics about how to create form. So here's a couple no-nos. You don't want to have your contrast so sharp that there's no transition between the dark and the light. And you don't want the darks all dark. You want a variation like we did in our value scale. I also say don't be afraid of the darks. This particular sphere is not near dark enough. So you want to go in with more marks, pressing harder on your pencil to get your darks. This sphere has a choppy transition between darks and lights. You would want to do strokes in different directions to break that up and just make an effort to have your transition be smoother. This is a real common habit. People will go over and over their outline trying to make sure they like where it is, and they end up making it look like a cartoon. So leave your line really light and let the shadow be the edge of your object. Some people will even put a line around the cast shadow, which is even more like a cartoon. So again, leave your lines real light. Let the shadow define that. So now you can draw your sphere. Take about 15 minutes to do this. You don't want to take too long. You'll get caught up in details. Just take a short amount of time. Try to get all the attributes of the sphere that I showed you and not really any more. We're not trying to make a perfect drawing. We just want to get the basic skills down. Drawing quickly is really a good way to learn, and I'll usually give you the amount of time that's probably best. So 15 minutes for the sphere that I just showed you, and here's the image. Go ahead and pause your video for 15 minutes and then come back. So you can practice with other simple objects. I've got some examples here, and you can take however much time you want, but remember, quick drawing gets you better a little faster. Get your own simple objects, get a good light source. Don't forget the basic skills of going general to specific, which means draw it, then get your basic shadows, and then add more detail. Don't forget about contrast, lots of lights and darks, and go a little bit faster. Push yourself just a little bit. Don't stress yourself out, but push yourself a little bit. You'll get better faster and be more confident.